Hi, Julia. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good. Happy to have you here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Can't think of anything else I'd want to be doing on a Wednesday morning, actually.
Oh, very nice. So, yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today, just for a few reasons, I think. I was actually thinking about that this morning. Why specifically do I want to speak with you in general? And I feel like you're a very unique kind of person. I think in the way that you show up, in the way that you do things, and the decisions that you make, everything that you do, I think, is just very different from what most people do. And I mean that in the best possible way, really.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that I feel like that, I don't know, to me it just seems like one of the big reasons why you are so successful in what you do. Just because your outlook, the things that you do, decisions you make, as I said before, those are all just very different from what most people would do in certain situations. And I have a coaching background, as do you. So I'm always just so interested with why people are the way that they are. And so I guess I could start with that. Why do you think you are the way that you are? What are the things, I don't know, maybe certain situations have happened to you or reasons for being who you are? What are some of those main things that come to mind for you?
My gosh, I loved that introduction. That was probably the best one I've ever had. And I'm glad that you brought up that my decision-making process, or perhaps how I am, is a bit different to the norm. And definitely my business journey and the businesses that I've set up are definitely kind of against the grain, I think. I don't know many people that are kind of doing what I've done, and definitely not, being part of a similar journey even. And I think one of the biggest things, and I was thinking about this when I was getting ready as well, actually, that, I grew up in a very Caucasian area in the suburbs of England, and me and my sister, we were the only girls of ethnic origin for miles and miles around. And we also had a really kind of quirky mum, so she quite liked to dress us quite differently and we'd always be matching. And actually the three of us, my mum, my sister and I, would always be in these wild matching outfits. And I just felt really different from a young age. I was very aware that I was a different colour to everyone else. That was a big thing. And growing up, unfortunately, I was made very aware of that, by children in school. And I think
Children are the worst.
They're the worst.
They're so mean.
I know, it actually stopped when I grew up, but they were the worst. That was like such a difficult time. But I got really used to being quite singled out and being made to feel very different and feeling very different and actually being different. I was different. And that became really normal to me. And I think that has carried through with me into my adult years, because now I don't care. I'll wear what I like. I'll be totally different to everybody else. I don't need to follow anybody. I am very used to not doing or feeling like other people do.
Yeah.
So I think it stems back to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like in those situations, it can go one of two ways. Either you revert to feeling such a need to fit in to make up for it, or the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So in
Absolutely.
your situation, it was that way around.
Well, I think I've gone through periods of my life where I was fiercely trying to fit in, but I never felt like I did.
It just didn't work.
It just didn't work.
It's like the effort here is not giving me the feedback I want.
Exactly, and I felt so much more empowered when I was just doing the things I wanted to do. I remember at the beginning of my business journey, I don't know if you remember this, but I would wear headscarves a lot.
Yes.
Do you remember? And I remember being in London before I set up my business and seeing girls do that and thinking, I'm just not cool enough to do that. And that was the time I was trying to fit in with everybody else.
Yeah.
And when I moved here, I thought, no, I'm going to do it. And I felt so empowered, like I'd achieved something. So I feel better, actually, when I'm just doing what I want to do and looking a bit different and not caring so much about what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you'd say that it was mostly the situations you went through in upbringing that made you who you are.
100%, yeah.
So I guess it always brings up this kind of debate between nature and nurture, which I'm fascinated by. And I feel like I ask myself this question all the time, like, are we the way that we are because of just who we are, our DNA, how we were born, genetics, or is it because of the certain circumstances we've lived? So could you place yourself on that scale? Like, where would you put yourself?
Well, I think it's both, right? Because I suppose nature-wise, I am a mixed race woman, you know, so that makes me different genetically as well.
Yeah.
So, and I've got a different culture and ethnic background to the people that I grew up with. But so I guess in that sense, yes, I would have a different genetic build-up. But in the way that I live my life, if I had have grown up perhaps in Mauritius, where my dad is from, I would have been completely different. So I think nurture has a huge part to play, but I think genetics are still there. So I think it's probably around 80% nature, because definitely the things that have shaped me have been the hard times in my life, and that's not to do with my genetics.
Yeah,
you know, that's to do with things that have just happened.
Yeah, such as.
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, actually. I was like, shall I go into it? We're going to get deep now. So I think there's several things, but the ones that stand out are when I moved to Thailand, I was 30 years old, and I moved because I knew that I wanted richer life experiences. Mm-hmm. I had such itchy feet when I was in London. Do you use that phrase? Yeah. I don't know if that's like a weird English phrase, So I just had such itchy feet, and I just knew that it was something I wasn't doing. I knew that I wasn't fulfilling my potential. Mm-hmm. And my friend was working in Thailand as a teacher, and I was a teacher at the time. And she just said, there's a job that's come up at my school. And I was like, I'm not moving to Bangkok. And then got the job and moved a week later. It was wild. But I found it so catastrophically hard to settle in Bangkok. I couldn't. It was so foreign, and it is so foreign. Yeah. It could not be more different to London. And it wasn't that I was unhappy in London. It's just that I wanted some more wild life experiences. I wanted a few more stories to tell my grandchildren. I just felt like I hadn't lived richly yet. But I would cry every day. I couldn't find the food I liked. I couldn't find a hairdressers I liked. I couldn't go and see my mum at the weekends. You know, I couldn't find the things at that time that would make me happy in London, and I didn't know how to comfort myself. Mm-hmm. And I went through this wild transition. And I remember at one point thinking to myself, okay, you either make this work for yourself or you go home. Yeah. So what are you going to do? And I remember this real conversation with myself, and I'd never had to go dig that deep before. And I thought to myself, well, if I go home, I'm saying to myself that I can't live abroad, and my whole life is going to look really different. Yeah. And do you want that for yourself? And I was like, I absolutely point blank refuse to make that my reality. And I made it work. And I've been here 10 years now. I'd honestly say I found it hard every year I've been here. It's not that it got much, much easier. I still find living in Bangkok quite tricky at times, but I made it work for myself. I brought in things that I knew would make me really happy. I went above and beyond with what I created for myself, which has actually been a blessing, because I don't think I would have done any of the things that I've done here in England.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like when you're in a situation, it's always hard, right? Because once again, it's that parallel between, do you push to make something work, or should you flow into it? And if it doesn't come with ease, it's not meant for you, you know? And I feel like that's another qualm that I deal with in my mind all the time. But I had a really similar situation when I was in Switzerland, where I was technically in the place I was kind of quote unquote from, but I felt so out of place and had this kind of culture shock living in Europe for the first time. And it was the same thing. I realized I can't find the things here that make me happy, therefore I should leave. And then I switched it around and said, what if I found the things that are here and found happiness within them instead?
Yeah.
You know, like trying to reverse that.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I like this and it's not here, it's like, well, what's here and how can I find joy into it?
What's an example of that?
I mean, I was comparing it to Singapore, right? Because I did high school in Singapore and then I was in Switzerland for university. And when I was there, I mean, I was thinking this place is so boring. There is no nightlife. Everything is closed at 2 p.m. Everything's closed on a Sunday. There's nothing to do. And I thought, okay, I don't like it here. Therefore, I won't live here forever, right? Because I don't like it here. So if you know you don't like it in a place, you know that you will do everything in your power to change something. So it kind of gives it a temporary space anyways. You know you won't stay there forever. So then I thought, if I'm not going to stay here forever, what are all the things that I can only find here that I will never experience again and therefore should make the most of? So I thought, okay, there's a beautiful lake, there's mountains to hike, there's other places in Europe to travel to. And so I thought, I'm going to enjoy the hell out of that and just make the most of it. And even if what I wanted was city life, okay, there isn't that. There's a mountain. So I might as well make the most of the mountain and just make a day of it and go hiking, go to the farmer's market, go to the lake every day, go paddleboarding, do all those things. And the more I started to do them, the more I realized actually it's great. Yeah. And then I completely reversed my entire perception of the whole place.
Yeah, because you find your things, don't you? And, you know, I did exactly the same thing. I remember actually making a list. I think I've still got that list somewhere, and it was such a basic list. What are all of the things that are making you unhappy about Bangkok, and what are the things that you can do to make you happy? So simple, but so powerful, because if you actually take action on that list, you're changing your whole experience. Entirely. And that's what I did.
So what do you think made you able to have that outlook, right? Because you need to have that outlook in the first place of, I want to improve things, I want to change things. Was it hitting a certain low that then it's kind of you didn't have a choice? Or do you think that there was something else within you that wanted to make it work some way or another?
Yeah, I mean, it was that feeling of when I had decided to come to Thailand. And I remember thinking, well, why are you doing this? You know, you really like your life in London, great friends, my family are here, you know, my job was solid. But it was just feeling like life was a blessing. And I think that my mum has always celebrated life, and she would always turn every occasion into something special. Even, you know, Sunday roast dinners was such a special thing. You know, if she wasn't there when we woke up because she would be working when we were children, she would leave us special hand-drawn pictures in our cereal bowls. You know, it was so special. And she always taught me to celebrate every year that you get older, which is one of the reasons I'm never complaining about my age. I'm always like, what a blessing to turn a year older, and how much wiser, and what a great year I had. My mum has always taught me to do that. And so I think that I've always seen life as such a blessing, and I knew that I wanted, and I still do, I want to make the absolute most of this time on this planet, because time's limited. And I wasn't going to like skulk back into the corner or retract or hide. You know, that this is all we've got, and I just can't. The feeling of regret, I think, would have been so much more traumatic to me than staying and making it work. And I guess as well, I've always had a belief in my strength, even if it's not at the forefront. I always know that it's there, and I think I was just told that I was strong. And I think we can do that for ourselves as well. But it does help, obviously, if you've been brought up with a mother and a father that are telling you every day, you're such a strong woman, you can do this, you can do anything.
So did you have to kind of talk yourself into, actually, I'm strong and I can get through this, and let's make the most of this, etc.?
Yeah. And it was such a quiet elevation, which is not like me, because, you know, I like to share elevations on social media. But it was such a quiet inner knowing that you've got to turn this around. And it had to be quiet, because I felt like I didn't want anyone watching me do that. You know, I just wanted to make sure it was happening. And it was me building the deepest relationship with myself that I've ever had, which has carried me through. And this is the thing as well about doing hard things. If you are at a time, if anyone that's listening is at a time where they're wondering whether to do the hard thing or not, if you do the hard thing, you learn skills that give you a better life and allow you to have richer opportunities and richer experiences in your life. Your life is better if you do the hard things.
Because it's not just the hard thing you do, it's the ability to do hard things that you're building, right? That muscle that then allows you to catapult that into the future. So it is more of a snowball effect than anything else. So what was the main lesson that came out of that situation for you?
I think it's knowing yourself and knowing what makes you happy. And again, that might be so different to different people. You know, you have to know what truly makes you happy and do a lot of those things. It sounds simple.
So what, for example, like when you were doing that list of what are the things that will make me happier here, what were some of those things?
So when I first moved to Thailand, I was going out a lot and partying, and this teacher lifestyle is a bit like that. I think the expat teacher lifestyle can be a bit like that, you know. Teachers are wild. And I only say that because I used to be one, right? And I was going out a lot, but what I realised is that doesn't make me happy. Yeah. I was tired. It's quite unhealthy. You know, there's too much alcohol involved, all of that kind of thing. And I realised that I really value the mornings. And I feel happier and much more empowered if I'm up early, I'm moving around, you know, I'm in a much better state if I wake up and I go for a run and I've meditated and then I go for coffee than if I wake up late because I've been out late and I've partied. And I realised that the connections I was making when I was partying weren't as kind of honest and authentic as the relationships I started to make when I'd go for coffee with people instead. So that was one of them. And then also eating right food. And that led me to creating a food business. Yeah. But I was eating quite unhealthy. I was eating out every night and getting street food because I didn't know what to cook. But actually it was like, yeah, of course the food's different. You're on the other side of the world. You have to find different ways of cooking. And you have to pay attention to that and put some effort into it. And so I bought an oven, I started baking, I started cooking, clean eating, and I was feeling that just those two shifts were massive.
So I always think with those things, because as you say, so you're in a situation where you're not feeling fully satisfied. So you ask yourself, what are the things that I want to have into my life, right, in order to kind of shift that. But the things that you were doing before still brought you something, right? Like that going out still brought you something. So how do you balance that? Are you just finding a different way to channel it? Or are you just accepting that I will just have to, quote unquote, lose out? Like, is it just a kind of a lose and gain situation? Or do you transfer what you get out of one thing and move it into another?
Yeah, I love that question. I think the word balance is so key there, because you don't have to cut out 100% anything. It's all, I hate that word moderation because I feel like it's so overly used, but it does have such a place, right, in wellness, because it really is moderation and it is balance. And so I think if you're ever doing too much of one thing, just like if I was never going out and always having nights in by myself and only going for coffees and that was my only social life, that might not feel good either. So it's really finding a balance that works for you as well. Now I know that, you know, going out once or twice a month is fun, and that doesn't seem to throw me off too much, and as long as I'm in bed by a certain time and those kind of things, and sometimes being spontaneous and all of that still has a place for sure, but it's just not doing it too much. Yeah.
So finding a balance between the two. So what's a lesson that came out of that for you? Was there a specific takeaway, like I need to be, I don't know, getting a certain amount of sleep, or I need to be doing this kind of routine, or I need to be prioritizing myself in this kind of situation? That was kind of a very kind of clear takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I need to be rested in order to have a peaceful, fulfilled, enjoyable life. That is for sure. So even if I'm going out late one night, I need to counteract that with some more rest and find parts in the next week or points where I can actually get more rest. If I'm not rested, nothing is working properly. You know, my moods are erratic, my business brain is off, I'm not focused. And it's just being super honest with yourself as well, because it's lovely to believe that we can do it all, right? I can go out and then I can kill it in business the next day. You know, I can have a brilliant relationships, brilliant friendships, brilliant work relationships. Doing it all of the time is going to burn you out. And I found that one of the hardest things, to be really honest with myself. What relationships are working? Which ones nourish and nurture you? How much of things can you actually do, you know, and kind of not judging yourself on that as well. So yeah, just being deeply honest with yourself, and nobody else can do that.
Yeah. And I think with that honesty, it's also knowing what your tendencies are. So if you know that you have a tendency to overestimate how much you can do, if you know that about yourself, it's whenever I think that I can still do a little bit more, that's my threshold. You know, so you change your threshold of, if I always think there's always going to be a little bit left in the tank, but in reality, from previous experiences, I've learned that there's actually not, and that's when I burn myself out, then you stop yourself before you get to the end, because that's how I am, right? Which kind of goes back to that nature versus nurture. It's like, you can know your nature and know that there are certain parts, characteristics, traits that I have that will be with me forever. But at least I know how to work with them, you know? As you said, like, oh, I have a tendency to, I don't know, maybe lose balance, or I have a tendency to get excited in a social situation and maybe take it too far, and then, you know, not have the rest that I need, or whatever it might be.
That's such a good point, because I know exactly what you mean. I mean, if I've got an important business meeting or something that I want to be really focused in, I know that if somebody's having a party or a birthday or whatever, I'm not going that night if I've got something important going on the next day, because I know that I won't just have one drink probably, and I know that I won't go to bed early, and I know that my mind is less focused the next day, even if I didn't drink anything. That level of socialising a night before I need my brain fully switched on the next day just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And the killer thing is about that is you're going to find, when you're being super honest with yourself and doing the things that you need to do for your life and for your business, you're going to find a lot of people who don't understand that.
Yeah.
And that's where as well it gets quite tricky, because you feel like you're kind of dealing with that as well, and you have to also put that out of your mind, because what's important is that you are living a beautiful life. And then you can give back to people as well, and give back to your business and the things that you've built. But not everybody's going to understand that, because it's different to everyone.
That's true. And everyone has to find their own, right?
Yeah.
So are there certain parts, you know, if we kind of go back to that nature versus nurture, are there certain parts of your nature, so your kind of intrinsic, from the get-go personality, that you know were true when you were younger, they're true now, and maybe you have to kind of work with them instead of fight against them?
Yeah, I mean, so I have got wild energy. That is for sure. I know it. I mean, when I'm on, I'm so on. I feel like a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's like I just want to make really high-pitched noises, and I can get really overly excited. That has been since I was a baby. My mum said I was like laughing all the time, just from a young child. I just think that I was like born to enjoy life. But over the years, that can be really scattered. And it's not focused energy, and it's not really doing any good, and it can be quite exhausting sometimes unless I focus it all in, ground it, center it, and then I can push forward really well. But it's that I've had to learn tools in order to do that. So sometimes the less rested I am, it can be more scattered, so I need to make sure I get rest. If I'm not meditating, that energy can sometimes make my moods a little bit erratic. Maybe erratic's a bit strong, but, you know, definitely not as stable, I suppose. And so I make sure I meditate every day, because that seems to kind of center everything and ground and plateau everything. And I can get very overexcited when I'm socializing as well, because then it's like lots of energy.
Feed off of it.
Yeah. And then it's getting really exciting. And so I have to be mindful about when I'm socializing and how. So it's things like that, you know, where if I've got a big business meeting, I don't, it's choosing where I'm going to expend that energy. Am I going to spend it on socializing, or am I going to spend it on business? And sometimes it's socializing and sometimes it's business. So it's just choosing where that goes. But that's definitely been a character trait, and I hope that lasts with me, because that is I can feel it. It's the most beautiful joy that just, and I hope everyone's got it. It just lives inside you, and it's sometimes bubbling to the surface, and sometimes it's just a low buzz, but it's just such a life force.
Yeah. It's amazing to find those things that are both your strengths and weaknesses at the same time, right? I always say that your strengths are your weaknesses and vice versa. So the things that make you you and are the reason for your success, for your relationships, for all the good things in your life is also your potential downfall, right? And it's the reality for all of us. We all have that. It's both our light and our darkness at the same time. And so I feel like being aware of what those things are allow us to, as you say, I have the practices to make sure that it doesn't get, over the top and I can channel it. So as you said, okay, I have these practices that help me do that. At the same time, that's, I know exactly the kind of energy you're talking about because obviously I see it within you. And also when you were at the cafe, when you're talking to all your clients and you would just bring so much energy and the energy would kind of reverberate and bounce off the walls in that place. And so that's what also was your success. So it's knowing both, knowing, okay, it might turn around and bite me in the ass at some point if I'm not careful, but also I want to nurture it because it's also going to be my biggest strength.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I think we're so prone to giving ourselves a hard time with certain character traits. But if you use the tools, you can often find ways to make it work for you, not against you.
Exactly. So are there any other of those traits that are both your strength and your weakness at the same time?
Oh, yeah. So I would say that I don't love planning things too strongly. But I know it's really important to have business plans. You've got to know where you're going. But I don't love it. I love to be spontaneous. Yeah. I love to see what's going to come into your path because often it's things you haven't even considered. And I love to make room for amazing things to happen. So that is a strength in the sense that I don't worry too greatly about what could happen because I haven't got really strong, definite plans in place, which means I can plow ahead without too much fear because I haven't thought too much about it.
Yeah.
But that's also a weakness, right? Because it means that sometimes I get to that place and I'm like, oh gosh, what now? And also sometimes in business, I've got to those places and we're not ready to be there. I haven't got the staff in place. I haven't trained them properly. And suddenly it's all a big explosion. And I'm like, it's a much more stressful way of living and doing business.
It's interesting. So that specific trait is linked to one of the big 5 personality traits, which are like, basically, psychologists have analyzed that all traits can be mapped out on 5 specific personality traits. And then one of them is conscientiousness, but then conscientiousness is divided into 2 different subtraits. Anyways, one of them is orderliness, which is the kind of creation of plan, execution, but also specifically following a straight line and thinking, I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, and I want to stick to the plan. It's usually somebody who's very high in that area doesn't want to be spontaneous because I want to stick to the plan. What's interesting is that they've actually showed that entrepreneurs are generally low in that area.
No way.
Yeah. Whereas you'd usually think it would be the opposite to a certain extent, but actually it's the opposite because in order to be entrepreneurial, you have to be able to pivot, you have to be able to change. And if you are too linear in your thinking and you're thinking, well, no, we're doing this and we're doing that next, that's when you don't have the flexibility needed in order to actually start a business.
Oh, I love that.
So it's funny that you say, because obviously it's a strength and a weakness for you. I have the opposite issue.
Yeah.
Because I'm very, very high in that dimension. But that's my weakness, is that I'm always so focused on I need to follow this plan that if things do change, all of a sudden it throws me off. And for me, it's very difficult, right? And even the idea of being spontaneous, like, oh, this great new business opportunity has arisen. Let's just jump on it. Whereas that might be something that you would do. That's something that I would, for example, struggle to do. So it always goes with this kind of, as you say, knowing yourself so well that you know exactly how you're going to react in different situations, and then also that you know the bias that your mind is going to make you take.
Yeah.
So for you, for example, a new opportunity might seem like a shiny light and I need to hold myself back. I might just jump on something too fast and get too excited. Whereas for me, kind of a spontaneous opportunity, I will immediately see it as a threat to my linear plan. Yes. But it's the same situation.
Yes, absolutely.
But the way that we interpret it is the opposite.
Yeah. And what do you do to counterbalance that?
I consciously try to be less planned in a way. And I really, really try to notice when I'm being too much like that, you know? So I do have the talk with myself of, it's okay to be spontaneous, or if somebody, let's say, throws a random plan, oh, hey, do you want to go do this? Generally, I already have a thought in my mind of what I was going to do that evening and why and whatnot. And so I really have to push myself out of my comfort zone, which sounds so silly, but that's actually the case, where I have to tell myself, stop being like this, take it. It doesn't matter if, you know, it throws my plan off a whack or whatnot. And that's also where I try, it's hard, but I try to be less kind of like data driven as well. Like, I mean, we both have this, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's funny because I went out to celebrate with a friend when we bought our apartment in Switzerland, and, you know, she bought us a bottle of champagne and all of this stuff. And because of that, the next morning I woke up less early. I was late on my like triathlon training. I checked my stats the next day, told me my recovery was down. And I remember seeing all these things being like, oh, my scores are down. I'm not following my plan. And then what Joe, my boyfriend, had said was, well, what is the benefit that you're getting that's not data driven? You know what I mean? Like, the benefit isn't all in the numbers. You know, the benefit is that you had a lovely evening, that you connected with a friend and all these things. And trying to think less on those terms and just kind of constantly, it's like constantly nudging yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think it's all about checking in with yourself.
Yeah.
It's almost like checking yourself, isn't it? You know, I totally see what you're saying. It's so interesting how different people are, isn't it? Like, hearing you speak like that, I'm like, wow, I can't imagine being like that.
You live in that head.
But you're probably the same as me. Like, what do you mean you don't plan? You know, I mean, it's just, I love it though. And I love it how two such different people can be such good friends.
Yeah.
You know, it's like opposites really do kind of attract, don't they? But yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting because I know how important my language is, right? And the words that I say. And my friends have even kind of pulled me up on this and said, God, it's so interesting because sometimes you'll be saying a sentence and you'll literally stop yourself and almost retract and just say the whole thing in a completely different way. And I know I do that, but I do it purposefully because I don't want to put negativity out there. And I truly believe that the things that you say come right back around again. And I change it. And so I'm constantly checking myself as well and being like, oh, hang on, Julia. Don't go down that road. I know it's tempting to start complaining and start, you know, telling everyone how difficult things are. If you don't do that and say the same thing in a much more positive way, you're going to get positivity back and you're going to feel better. So I'll stop myself. And it's really like that, isn't it? It's like, you know, knowing when you're doing certain things that you're habitually used to doing, stopping yourself in your tracks and being like, hang on, let me choose another way. And actually, it's clinically proven that the more you do that, the more naturally your mind will start to actually go to that place instead. Yeah. So it's like making the decision that you want to change something that is already a habit and constantly doing it. And then the other thing may become more of a habit to you the more that you stop yourself.
Yeah, completely. So then, speaking of habits, you know, you obviously made this change into a much more kind of wellness focused lifestyle. Was that a specific moment? Was that something that happened gradually? Was there, I don't know, someone who was an inspiration or an influence in that realm? Like, how did that shift happen and what did that shift look like?
Yeah, so I remember sitting in my room in London as a primary school teacher and just being like, I just want something different. I don't know what it is. I was thinking of being a yoga teacher and, you know, thinking what I could do. And I used to look at Instagram accounts from Deliciously Ella, you know, in London. And also there was someone at the time called Madeline Shaw.
I remember her,
yeah. And they were just doing...
Where did she go?
I don't know. She should come back. She was great. But they were doing things like making chocolate with no sugar. You know, they were kind of the
revolutionary.
First ones. Right. And like now that's like really normal. But back then it was just really groundbreaking. Yeah. It was really innovative. And I was just fascinated with making brownies with sweet potatoes or, you know, using honey instead of sugar. I mean, really simple things now. But I used to look at their Instagram accounts and just be like, how did they make a life like this? How do you do that? I remember watching one of them having her hair done to go on a podcast. How funny. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to do that. I just want to do that in the mornings and drink coffee and, you know. So the thing I always say to kind of clients or when people ask me, is that I believe that kind of absolute adoration of those people and absolute deep desire for that to be part of my life was planting a seed.
Yeah.
And then I started experimenting, and I started actually making my own desserts and taking pictures of them and posting them on Instagram. And it's actually hilarious if you look at those photos. They are actually on an Instagram that I never tell anyone about. But it's cute because I love that, Julia, because I'm like, she was trying and she was starting actually. Yeah. And I think I'd get like 2 likes or something. And but I didn't care. I was like, maybe if I keep doing it, I'll get better. And I'm trying something new. I was trying to be like them. And but that was watering the seed that I'd already planted. And it does start to grow. So that's what I always say to my clients. Water the seed, like the passion or the excitement or just this idea that you might want this kind of life or this job or this way of living. And start doing things that are a bit like that. And it seems to shift your vibration and your energy. And I do think you're kind of putting a message out to the universe saying, this is what I want. I'm ready. I'm doing it. I know it doesn't look how I want it to look yet, but it is there. And that's basically what happened. I kept doing that when I moved to Thailand. And it was getting a few more likes. I think I moved up to 5 or 6. And but before I knew it, I had this business where I was getting, a lot of likes for posting food, and I was getting professional photographers to do it because you've got to know your strengths and weaknesses.
I'm smiling so much because I had the exact same situation. As you saying that, I'm visualizing myself in my like tiny studio flat in Barcelona trying to get like the last few seconds of daylight. At the time, I was really into like Kylitziness and all that type of stuff. And I remember I had that exact same thing, as you say, that kind of feeling of like, that's the kind of life I want. That's who I want to be. And I think it's almost shifting your identity, as you say, it's like you're putting it out there, this is what I do, but it's also this is who I am. And that changes things.
Yes.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, social media gets a bad rep, but you do have those positive influences that literally will change your life.
Yeah.
Because you'll look at someone and say, okay, that's what I want to go towards. It gives you a vision of what's possible for you, or what's possible for the future, and you start to change things in your everyday life. And before you know it, you have a completely different life, and that's snowballed.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that about what some people think about social media. I know it can have its downfalls, but for me, I think it's the most incredible platform ever. I'm talking primarily about Instagram here. For me, I've built every single business that I've had on Instagram from scratch, and the reach is absolutely massive, and it's free.
Yeah.
Why on earth would you not use that? And you get, as you said, you get so much inspiration, so much motivation on a daily basis. You just have to be careful not to get obsessed with it. But if you take it in a positive light, like you were just saying, I think it can be groundbreaking. It can change your life. I didn't have as much access to what's possible for you before Instagram, and then I was like, wow, look at what people are doing with their lives.
Exactly. So you started getting that inspiration, started taking on those, as you say, kind of trying to do things in a similar way or whatever that might be. What are some of the practices that you started doing that had the biggest impact on you from a wellness standpoint?
I would say meditation, because when I first started my business, I was teaching at the same time. And so I was up till 2 a.m. baking, and then I was going home in my lunch break to take banana bread out of the oven. And then I was like baking until 5 a.m. It was absolutely wild what I was doing. And I was starting to burn out in such a big way. I was getting really moody. I was like, my fuse was so short. And I remember kind of sitting down and being like, I'm shaking. I can't stop shaking. And it was just exhaustion. And then I remember an ex-boyfriend actually almost dragging me to a meditation centre. And at the time I was like, oh, you're the worst boyfriend in the world, forcing me to do things. And actually I could not be more grateful now, because that changed my life. That allowed me at any point in the day to sit down, check in with myself, give myself some deep, deep rest. They say 20 minutes deep meditation is the same as 2 hours sleep. Yeah. And so when I wasn't getting so much sleep, if I could sit down in the middle of the day and do that, it would just calm my nervous system right down. And I do think that saved me. I don't know how much longer I could have actually gone in that life for. And I didn't, because I left teaching eventually anyway. But Yeah, and ever since then, even my staff would say to me, "Have you meditated this morning?" Because I'd be like, "Oh no," because it's like, yeah, because I'm a much calmer. Not much gets to me, honestly. Like, I'll drop a glass on the floor if I haven't been meditating for a few days, and I'll be like, "Oh, I'm so annoyed by it." If I've been meditating, it's like I see that happening, and I'm like, "Oh." It's so different.
Okay, so what does your meditation practice look like now?
So I did training in transcendental meditation, and so you're meant to do it 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, but I don't, that sometimes feels like a bit much. So I just do 20 minutes in the morning. I use Insight Timer, and it's quite nice because then you can see your meditation days building up, and you can really like data track with that as well.
You know, I think that's, I mean, we were speaking about this before we started recording, that I feel like I meditate consistently, but I don't do it daily or regularly. You know, I do it like twice a week, pretty much every week. But because I've never really had a tangible outcome from it, you know, like what I was saying before, for me, if I exercise versus a day where I don't, or I go for a walk or whatever, those things have crazy impact on the rest of my day, my mood, my mindset, all of this. Same with the way that I eat. And same with many other things like journaling or whatnot, or socializing especially. But meditation never really brought that to me. So I just kind of do it because it's like I should.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it's really...
I know what you mean. You know, I think about it like exercise. Obviously, exercise boosts your mood, motivates you, you know, makes you feel amazing, but also makes you look amazing. And we can't deny that is a motivational factor. I think with meditation, we can't see the changes in our brain, you know, because it's not visible. But actually, if you look at research, like when someone's meditating, it's actually, they've got this, they did this experiment where they put hundreds of people into a CT scan and they watched them meditating over days, and it's actually reducing the cortisol in your brain. Like, it's actually changing your brain waves as well. I mean, that's mad, but we can't see any of that.
We can't see it, and to be honest, I've never necessarily felt it either.
Yeah, but it's like a muscle that, you know, if you want, for example, to get stronger in your arms, you've got to lift weights at a certain regularity. Yeah. And that's the same with meditation, I think. It's a muscle. And so it's like you have to get the muscle working. And also, I think when you're doing it less regularly, it's harder to flex that muscle. So it's like when I'm doing it every day, I can slip straight away into deep meditation. But that took massive practice. And in the beginning, I'll be like, oh, you know, finding it so frustrating. But now it's like deep straight away. And then I'm like, oh. And it helps with every aspect of life. And what's mad now is that I get loads of downloads when I'm meditating. It's like an inner voice will speak so clearly and deeply to me. You know, last week I went to Vietnam because I was like, you need to finish this clothing line. That just came to me on Monday during meditation. I flew to Vietnam on Tuesday.
Wow.
Because I trust it so much now.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so that meditation's one of them. Anything else?
I think it's the general things, like you've got to make sure you're fit and healthy. Yeah. You know, you do. Like, you can't do that much and you're going to get really tired and burnt out if you're not fit and healthy. You've got to eat healthy food. Yeah. You've got to work out regularly. You've got to move your body. You're just going to get really tired. And, you know, competition is high, right? Lots of people are doing what you're doing. The thing that will set you aside from other people and make you really great is if that you have great stamina and you have consistency.
Yes.
Being fit and healthy will help you do that. Like, stamina is everything. You work on your stamina in your body and then you go through your day with that same stamina.
True. And I mean, exercise is hormetic stress, right? So you're putting small bouts of positive stress on your body and increasing your ability to withstand it. Yeah. And that stress, if it's physically on your body, is the same thing as mental load stress that you're dealing with on a daily basis. Yeah. And so if you're improving your ability to respond to stress, then you can withhold more of it and you can do more things, right?
Absolutely. That's, such a good point. And the other thing is journaling. It's such a daily practice for me. I don't even kind of, sometimes.
You do it every single day? So you journal every day, you meditate every day, you exercise every day?
4 times a week. Yeah.
That's a lot of things. I mean, someone might say, like, I don't have time to do that, or how do you do all those things in one day?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, everyone has time. I know some mums that do it. I don't know how mums do it. You know, if I had a child to get ready in the morning as well, I really don't know. I take my hat off to mums that do that. But you just get up earlier, basically. And it, once you start feeling the benefits of it, that's so much motivation. But journaling for me is the greatest wellness practice I've ever come across in my entire life. That is the thing. So straight away when I wake up, before I turn on my phone, before I do anything, it's my time with myself, and I'm just writing down anything that's in my mind. It can be one sentence, it can be like 3 pages. This morning it was really long, and it's just tuning in. Who do I really want to be? What did I like about what I did yesterday? What do I want to do today? Because we're constantly evolving and changing, and if you really want to be everything that you can be, reflection is everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, it's interesting as well what you were saying, because tying into what we said previously about knowing yourself and also personality. I mean, I used to do the Miracle Morning routine. You know Miracle Morning? Yeah. So the premise, for anyone who doesn't know, is a book. The idea is, I think you do 6 practices. It's like movement, meditation.
It's the ends, isn't it? Mindfulness.
Is it movement, meditation? It was, I don't know, there's an acronym that I don't remember. But essentially it was movement, meditation, journaling. Oh no, I don't remember the other 3.
I have to put it in the notes.
There's 6 things that you have to do. And I did them religiously every morning for maybe 2 years or 3 years. And I found that because of my personality and the way that I am, I think that had a more negative impact on me than anything else.
Really?
Just because it became so rigid and so strict. You know, and that was the kind of thing where, I don't know, it's a Saturday, or for whatever reason, my boyfriend's not going to work. Oh, well, I'm not going to lie in and have a cuddle, or whatever it is. Or, hey, let's change plans. Actually, whatever, my appointment got canceled. Let's go for a coffee. No, I can't because I have to do this thing. So it became so rigid for me that it had a opposite impact.
Well, it's quite a lot of things to do in the morning.
There's a lot of things. I don't remember what they are.
Because, and then, do you know what? I think that's great practice, because you can choose from those 6 things which are really working for you. Because for me, if I don't meditate and journal in the morning, I'm just not centered. I can't see myself. I can't feel myself, and that's what you need when you're an entrepreneur. I truly believe that, because if you're not in with yourself, it's so easy to doubt yourself. It's so easy to feel like you don't belong in certain rooms, not build what you need to build, show up on social media. All of those things need you to have a deep relationship with yourself, because you're the only one some days telling yourself you can do it, And so I know that journaling is the one thing. I have to do it. I just feel like wobbly if I don't do it. It's like medicine.
Yeah. And the more you do it, I bet the more you just kind of know how you feel when you do.
Yeah.
That's how I sometimes feel that with food, because sometimes I think, how do people have these routines or eat certain things and are functional human beings? And I sometimes think, not everyone knows how good you can feel if you do things differently.
Yes, exactly. And also, it's small shifts. Yeah. Like I was saying, you just have to write a sentence if you can't think of anything else to write. But it really helps, even just a sentence. And with food, sometimes it's just choosing to have a piece of fruit, or making sure you're getting enough vegetables every day. They're such small shifts, because I think it can feel daunting to people that don't have those practices in their life sometimes. But actually, the small shifts will make such a massive difference. And chances are, when you feel the difference, you're going to want to keep going in
completely
ways.
And it's always the first small shift that then catapults the rest, right? So it's always then like an upward spiral of that.
Exactly.
So you mentioned in terms of entrepreneurship, one of the main things is centering yourself, knowing yourself. Are there any other kind of key elements that you think anybody who does want to start a business or is an entrepreneur at the moment needs to have in order to do the best they can in it?
Well, first of all, you've got to love what you're building. You've really got to believe in it more than anybody else. You've got to know whatever you're creating or building has got the best vibe. It's different from what other people are doing. It's niche, it's exciting, it's on trend. You've got to believe that more than anybody else, and you've got to love doing it, because there's no way that business journey isn't going to be hard. That's for sure. There'll be beautiful, incredible moments. There's going to be really dark, hard moments too. And if you love it, that passion will carry you through. And you have to do in business the one thing that not everybody does, and not many people do actually, which is be consistent.
Yeah.
And you've got to show up in the hard times, and you've got to practice doing that. Now, the first time you have a hard time and you need to show up for business is so hard too, but you have to. Business doesn't just go when you're feeling good. And as humans, we don't always feel good. We can't. That's not our makeup. But you have got to consistently show up for business, otherwise it won't work, and that will put you off the grid, and there will always be people that will be consistent and they will be ahead of you.
Yes.
So that is the greatest skill that I've learned in my entrepreneurship. There's been really hard times, but I've still, kept going to my restaurant, kept showing up on social media. I know those hard times will pass, because they always do. Some are longer than others, for sure. But if you want a successful business, you've got to practice being consistent in all areas of your life, which is challenging.
Yeah, super hard. So you mentioned earlier doubt, right? So obviously doubt, insecurity, imposter syndrome, like I have no idea what I'm doing and everyone's going to find out. That kind of feeling is present regardless when you're starting something new, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Can you think of specific times where you felt that the strongest in your business journey?
I think when I opened my restaurant, I opened in a high-end mall in Bangkok. And I was dealing with some people that felt like they were way above me. I was dealing with the CEOs of M. Courtier and talking to them about business. And to be frank, they weren't nice conversations. They're very, I like to think I'm a warm business owner. I like to do business in a really friendly, lovely, warm way. That wasn't warm. Yeah. It was quite difficult. And so that I found really hard. And I was walking into rooms thinking, it's just me. I've always been a solo entrepreneur, and there would be 5 or 6 of them saying to me, well, what about this in the contract? No, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And, so those were real times when I'd have to really walk in and, get myself ready and sit down and know what I was going to say and look them right in the eye and say, no, I want this. No, this is going to be the way that I want it to go if you want my business here. In a nice way, not combative. But, yeah, that was definite imposter syndrome. And, you have to pinch yourself, because I was running a bakery from my kitchen at home, and suddenly I was in a high-end mall in a restaurant, so it was like, wow. But, the way I dealt with that was I would just tell myself every day, you can do this. And you've got to see yourself. That's why it's so important when you're planting the seed, to see yourself in that life that you want. Mm-hmm. The more you do that, you're kind of like flexing this idea that you belong in that world. Yeah. Even if you don't have it yet. And
I think, interestingly enough, it's related to what we said before about whenever you feel like an imposter, it's because there's something that you think either you don't have enough experience, or you're too young, or you're too this, or you're too that. And if we bring it back to what we were saying at the beginning, if your biggest strength is also your biggest weakness, the reason why you're an imposter is also the reason why you're in the room.
Yeah.
So, that's something that I used a lot, because I started my business right out of university, right? I was 22, and I was thinking at the time, I'm young, I have no experience, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I really sat with myself and said, in what way is being young and experienced and having no idea what I'm doing my biggest strength, and the reason why I should be in the room?
Oh, I love that.
And so with that, it was literally, okay, yes, those are all true. And it's not about trying to pretend that they're not. And I think sometimes that's more accessible. Yeah. Because it's like, yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not young and inexperienced. If I'm young and inexperienced, realistically, that's what I am.
Yeah.
But it can be as much of an asset as it is a downfall.
Exactly. It's like, choose what you're going to focus on, because actually it could be such an asset. People want to work with young, vibey, fresh-minded people that haven't been in the industry too long. Like, actually, when I employ people, I love that. I love the ones that have just come out of university and they're like ready to work. They've often got so much more work ethic than anybody else, So that's, I think, yeah, you're right. Use what you have to your advantage. And there's no way you can grow without walking into rooms that you've never been in before.
Yes.
You are, every time you up level, the next level, you always start at the bottom. And that is tricky, right? Because you're so used to being at the top of the last level. And then you're like, oh gosh, now I'm right back to not knowing what I'm doing, feeling like an imposter. But if you want to get to the next level, that's the beginning of it.
Completely. And it's almost then reframing it of, if I'm the biggest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room, right? So that imposter syndrome is positive. It means I'm in the right place. So then all of a sudden you start to switch it as the imposter syndrome isn't I'm in the wrong place. The imposter syndrome is I'm in the right place.
Yes.
And it's working with that kind of reverse psychology.
Absolutely. And honestly, we think everybody's got it figured out. We think everybody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what
the people who run our country, no idea.
Really, like, you know, I mean, there's still, if you asked me to set up another restaurant tomorrow, yes, I've got a much better idea than I did 5 years ago, right? But I would want to be doing it on a different level, and therefore I don't know what I'm doing, you know, but I believe that I can do it because I've already done it, and I believe that I could do it even before I did it, because it's just belief. You know, when I was going to sleep last night, I was thinking about you, which I don't know why I think it's
honoured.
I think it's because I knew we were filming today, obviously. But and I was thinking, I have never met someone that is so seemingly confident in their abilities and the way they show up. I don't think I know anyone that shows up as confidently as you do. And I know that's from the inner work that you've done and your practices and the way that you talk to yourself. I'd love to hear from you. How do you do that? Just from a personal standpoint, I genuinely want to know.
I mean, I think, honestly, it's what we said before about knowing yourself. You know, because as you said, if you know yourself so well, yes, you'll know your downfalls to the T. But the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. So the downfalls that you do know about yourself, you know how to deal with them. And the strengths that you do have, you know about them as well. So all of a sudden, it's all your cards. The cards are in your hand because you know where you might slip into something because you know your own negative traits as well.
Yeah.
But then you also know what are your strengths that you can play up on. And honestly, I think it all comes down to that, to literally knowing yourself, which is why for me, everything around wellness, business is personal development. All of it is personal development.
Yes.
Because it's all one.
Yeah. And what drives you to develop yourself personally?
I think just, I don't know, I would say improvement initially. But I almost feel like I've moved away from that to a certain extent, a little bit. I don't know. I think, you know, what are we doing if we're not here to understand ourselves better and understand the world better? I guess I'm just deeply curious as well.
Yeah. It's amazing. I'm so impressed by the way that you show up. It's so clear that you do value self-development so much, you know. But isn't it amazing, you know, for anyone that's thinking that they're not as confident or they are doubting themselves or having massive imposter syndrome, you know, yeah, I will say it definitely, there are tools and skills. And it does help if you've had a background, you know, with a family that has been telling you can do it and genuinely believes in you too. Not everybody has had that. So I totally understand sometimes the foundations aren't there and it is harder. But for sure, you definitely can do it. There are tools, there are practices, there are daily things that you can do to build yourself up to get into those rooms.
Completely. And, you know, as you said before, I mean, you're always a beginner somewhere, but then the experience as well builds up with time.
Yeah.
Right? So with all the experience that you've had in business, in life, and in everything that you've done, what's something that you had to learn along the way, maybe the hard way, that you wish someone would have told you that can be a kind of final closing remark for anyone listening?
I like that. You know, when I was opening my restaurant, I went through a really, really hard breakup, and it happened about 3 months before I opened, and I was in so much pain. I was just thinking, but I was so grateful for the restaurant because it really took my mind off it. It was a brilliant distraction, and I was creating. And there were days where I was just so emotional and in so much pain, but I learned the skill of turning my pain into power. And I remember thinking, right, like you were saying, what's the benefit of this pain? Yeah, it's a horrible feeling. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants it. But it's completely, of course, there's no way you're going to go through your life without feeling pain, right? So I was thinking, what are the positives about this breakup? Well, I am so grounded. I'm so humbled. None of this opening a restaurant is going to my head because I'm in so much pain. And it opens your heart in such a big way. And it removes layers of yourself, I think. And with this open heart, I was able to create in a way that I never have before. I was able to send out even more love through my business, through the quotes, through the flowers, through the way that I was presenting the food, through what I was putting out on Instagram, because I needed that love myself. And so I was providing this comfort, and it was just after COVID. So I think it was speaking to people's hearts too, you know? And so pain is actually a gift, I would say. And I don't want it anytime soon either, but I'm so grateful for it because it's the greatest teacher, and it is the greatest opener for deep creativity.
Amazing. Thank you, Julia. So grateful to have you here. So grateful to have you sharing. As I said at the beginning, I think you're so different in the way that you do things, show up, the decisions you make, but even the way that you put things together, the way that you express yourself. So I know that everything you've shared will speak greatly to anyone listening.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've absolutely loved being on. It's so easy talking to you. It's such a great podcast, so thank you.
And just to close up, where can everybody find you?
So I am on Instagram, and I am called The Banana Warrior. That was the name of my restaurant. So stay tuned for the next one. And yeah, just send me a DM on there and we'll connect and get chatting.
Amazing. What's next for you in business?
I'm developing a clothing line, actually. So excited about it. That's actually going to be ready to launch this time next month. Mad.
So it'll be ready to launch by the time this comes live.
Yeah, amazing. I think it's going to be called House of Banana.
Love it.
And there will be a restaurant coming very soon as well that will incorporate a yoga studio and a concept store with my clothing brand in it. Not sure where in the world yet, but let's see.
Amazing. Keep tuned for that.
Yes.